Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township, May 21st, 2019. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, could Pastor Nate lead us in prayer from Compelled Church?
Thanks you guys for serving. Let's pray. Lord, we ask your blessing upon our township. We have a great township. We're thankful and grateful, and I'm thankful and grateful for leaders. Sometimes, Lord, they don't get anything but grief. Sometimes, Lord, they get a lot of criticism. They have to deal with a lot of different people, and I just pray, God, you'd encourage them tonight. I pray, Lord, that this meeting would go great. I pray, Lord, as they wrestle with a lot of issues, and we don't always agree on anything, Lord, but help us always to not be agreeable. Bless these leaders for their service to our community, Lord, and we ask your hand of blessing upon this meeting in our township, our schools, our churches, our people. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 2 is approval of the agenda.
Approval of the agenda is submitted.
Support.
Okay, motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3 is the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to approve and place on file the minutes of the May 7th, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, approve and place on file the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending April 30th, 2019.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
No support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. We have no presentations. Number 5 is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up. Okay, seeing we have none. Item 6 is staff reports from the fire chief.
Yes, he's going to be running late.
Running
and
late?
asked if we would just
Okay.
allow him to speak when he comes in.
Okay, item 7 is unfinished business, discussion of code of conduct ethics policy. Mr. Steiner?
Board, I have forwarded information to you after some review and working through MTA. Had various communities around the state had responded with various things that they had for policies on standards of ethics and code of conduct. Through my conclusion, it looks like the ones that were worth looking at basically mirror what MTA has in their Policy Matters book. So I sent you copies of the MTA policy. I think it was Whitmore Lake and Boys Blank Township both mirrored identically what the MTA book says. I had a couple small blurbs from Ada Township and SOO Township. So I guess tonight what I'm bringing back is we had the discussion on whether we have or should have a code of ethics policy in place. Paul Francis pointed out to me, it reminded me that we had discussed some of this during policy meetings quite some time ago, but nothing is officially implemented based on policies so far. My question tonight is, before spending a lot of time trying to draft anything, to find out that the board doesn't want to do anything, I want to find out from the board this evening what your pleasure is. One of the things that I would suggest, in my opinion, is looking at the MTA. They have covered almost everything that you can think of, and my thoughts are if we look at that one and either add or take things out of the MTA, and then go forward from there, if the board decides that they want to work on drafting a policy. If you don't want to do it, I will just leave it at that. But we have these ideas in front of us for review.
Anybody have anything, Mr. Francis?
I went back through notes that I've had on the policy review that we've been working on for a long time and haven't yet completed. We've already been through the section that covers ethics and code of conduct and made some changes. We last looked at it on April 11th, 2017. So I ran a picture of what our last version was for all the board members to take a look. It just tweaks the language that MTA had in their recommendations for policy matters. Rick is correct, it covers everything you can possibly think of, I think, and it might be appropriate for us to look hard at that and maybe adopt that, even though it's just one portion of the master policies that we're still working on.
Ms. Tinneberry?
To me, this just came out of the blue, so I'm wondering what precipitated this, because we do have the thing that we all signed. It's pretty much ethics, an ethical way in which, board members and employees and whoever should be behaving. I'm at a loss. I'm a person that works out of purpose, so I'm just not sure what the purpose is.
Well, this didn't just come out of the blue. This was discussed months ago, and we talked about this, and I said I would bring things back to the board to look at and review.
Excuse me, Rick, but I meant then when it started, when you brought it up.
And there are issues that have taken place, and we have no mechanisms to enforce anything based on just that one-page signed document by the board. If we ever have to have a review or remove somebody or censor somebody from a board or committee or commission, we don't have any tool in our policies that actually allows us to do that.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I must have missed the ones that you gave us, or the ones that I received, didn't have any way of, any enforcement, no monitors, no consequences.
Well-
And I'm wondering, I mean, maybe the attorney
Tom's
can-
got all the copies. He's looked
No,
over.
no, my question is, what legal right of enforcement does this board have over another elected official?
I'm not talking about elected. Even so, we're talking about boards, commissions, committees, volunteers, appointees, et cetera, that this would cover. Now, one of these items that I did forward to you talks about a ethics board, so that was one of the thoughts. The MTA does not actually mention the ethics board per se if we were to go that route, and that's why I said the MTA, it may or may not suffice if we want to do this with what the language says specifically in there. That the MTA does not specifically give you any recourse on that. Now, you're right, certain elected offices, you may have to have removal, maybe by the governor or, your higher powers. But that's not the case that we're talking about here.
Tom, can you speak to that with what legal right?
Well, I can
You want to
just-
turn your mic, make sure your mic's
Yep,
pointed in.
yep, thank you. So, I did look at these briefly today, and all I would say is that I'm not saying we're against them or for them, but we would appreciate the opportunity to, have a chance to tweak them or change them or whatever direction you want to go. But here's something you have to remember, and I was interested in what Nancy was saying about the enforcement end of it, but here's what you have to remember. when it comes to an elected official, the 7 of you, the park commissioners, the only person that can remove anyone is a governor, unless they meet some, special statutory procedure like dying or moving out. Then that's kind of a removal type of thing. Or there are some processes, conviction of an infamous crime. Well, an infamous crime is a serious, I'm not going to say murder is the only one, but that's the kind of crime we're talking about. Or a violation of an oath of office or things like that. So there are very specific statutory procedures. And as far as the governor goes, it's very specific as well. They have to be there has to be evidence presented. He has to be satisfied that something very serious went wrong with an elected official, as you would want, because the voters have elected you or the park commissioners. So it's a
Excuse
process
me.
that you can't interfere with.
That's my point. How does this relate to this board? I mean, a policy that we would develop has nothing to do with any of those criminal things.
No, I look at the thing, the one-page item that you guys all signed, and it was like a statement of, here's how we should be operating. Here are the things we should strive for, which are good. And I suppose you could have that same thing for appointees, unless there's some violation of employment contract. I guess you could have it for employees as well, and those sorts of things. But the procedure for any kind of, removal or anything like that of an elected official has to go through the governor's office. As far as any kind of action against an appointee, I would be against having this board, external board, because you make the appointments. I would imagine that you have to take the action against the appointee that you have made, okay? And I would say that an appointee would want you and would want to appear in front of you, not some board. And so we're not in favor of that, but look, I just looked at it today, so we would not be in favor of that. So having some statement of how you should act or behave as an appointed official, elected official, or which you've already signed, or as an appointed official, or something, maybe even an employee or something. I have no problem with that. It's when it gets into the process that I'm a little nervous, and that's why we, as the attorneys, wanted to look at it if you decide to go forward on it. Because if you're going to remove someone that you've appointed for a term, and I would hope that whenever you make an appointment, it is for a term, 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, whatever it is, to remove them before their term is up for some wrongdoing, you have to give them due process. They have to have a right to hire an attorney and appear, and you have an evidentiary hearing. Even the governor's process has that procedure in it, because you wouldn't want it any other way in case you were the person. You'd want a right to respond, and everybody would. So the bottom line is, when you make an appointment, you would, like all of us think, well, an appointment to one of these committees, it's not that big of a deal. But the truth is, the person appointed has a right to believe that he or she can serve until the term is up. And when you start talking about removing them, that is a big deal. And so you have to, you're always, no matter what you do, the process is always going to be some sort of hearing in front of this body if you're going to remove someone. And I'm not saying you never would remove anyone. I'm just saying that's always going to be the process. I could never, and I talked to Attorney Goldsmith about this a little bit before tonight, we could never have an external board make decisions when we're the appointing. It isn't fair to either side. So that's not a negative against having something, because I was just looking at what you guys signed. That's pretty good. But there's no process in there for enforcement. That's
No, but
just a
there-
guide.
It wasn't meant to be a process for enforcement. It's meant to be a personalized agreement. That's why we signed it.
Right.
This is all right from the MTA. This is-
Right.
Well, couldn't we just have the boards and commissions sign one of these as well? Like each group
Well-
sign as well? And then if they do screw
Well,
up, or
can I
you
say
just
one more
don't,
thing?
you don't reappoint them?
That, what Paul said, Paul Francis, is totally true. We went through this, Rick was a part of the committee, myself and Larry Odell, and we put together the whole board policy. Part of it had to do with this, ethics, and I would like to go back to approve that whole board policy. He just mentioned it's been since 17. It was before that the three trustees at that time worked on it. I would like to just get that done and approve that and not come up with anything new. I believe that this ethics code of conduct for the board suffices. Once you sign it, you're agreeing to what is on the page and move on from there to just approve this. I'm not at all in favor of an ethics board either, so my vote would be no on something new, but I would like to see us approve the full board policy.
Paul, where are we at with that as far as getting it sent out to board members to move forward with it?
Ready to go with another section. I think we've been through 4 or 5, and I think, excuse me, I think there are 10. I agree, we need to get that done.
Could we pick a date tonight and move forward with it? Because it's kind of sad that we have something still sitting since 17,
That's true.
unfinished.
I think the thrust of the MTA's recommendation, which you all have a copy of as we've been through, is really aimed at everyone, including the elected officials, but specifically, we know what we can and can't do for elected officials, and Tom just mentioned that. And, you know, we have no reason to worry about that, but this really should apply to everybody, all the appointees, all the employees of the township and the like. It's not magic, it's just really common sense and just lays it out. This is the standard that we want to have all of us live by. So I think Nancy's exactly right. We ought to press forward on that policy manual and get it done.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions, or we want to move forward with
Well,
Mr. Francis' suggestion?
I would just say that, you know, that I'm going to keep this group or packet of materials that was provided, and there may be some things in there that are good to, and maybe the committee should consider that or whatever. But we couldn't accept any of these just as they are written right now, including the MTA, because again, this procedure, you are locked into a certain procedure. So I'm just saying I'm not going to throw mine away. I'm going to hold on to them, and because there might be some things in there that are good. There are some things in there that are good, so, thank you.
I don't think you throw anything away, Tom. I've seen
Well,
your
if you
office.
saw my office.
Yeah,
Then in your
yeah.
office, you don't throw anything away, you know.
Oh, I agree with Ms. Tinneber. I mean, I think you get down a very sticky path to where you have a board that can just throw people off of it. If they're not doing their job, you just don't reappoint them. You know, I mean, so, anybody else have anything else, or look to move forward?
I think we need to move forward because, I mean, in the news in the last 2 days, you've had a legislator who's getting ready to go in for having sold his vote, and I realize that's an extreme case, but ultimately, we all took an oath that we would do what we could to protect the township and watch out for the best interest of our neighbors. As we sit here tonight, we know that any committee member on any of the number of committee in Bedford could do almost anything, and we would have, you've just verbalized, we have zero authority or control or process by which to either reprimand, remove, and I think that's largely irresponsible. I don't think we want to run up, an intense legal bill, but I think we're far enough along with this one ethics draft that we ought to at least see that through and see where it lands us, because we ultimately have a responsibility should anything happen. We need to act. We need to be in a position to act. But what we don't want to do, have it happen and then have council say, well, too bad, you have no mechanism to to address this, and now we've been irresponsible and not taken the lead that we should.
Yeah, and you can look at that both ways, you know, I mean, as far as, you know, that goes, but any more discussion on that, or would you like to move forward?
One more thing. I also agree with Nancy that we should not have an ethics board, a separate board. This board is the responsible one. We're the ones that were elected to do the job. I think it's up to us
Correct.
to handle that, and we don't need to have that. Now, if we were a township that would had, 2,000 employees, we might think differently because it might be more involved, but we're not, so let's tailor it to our needs, and I don't think we need to have an ethics board or committee or whatever you want to call it.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I'm been pondering what TC said, and I'm not sure I understand it. Are you saying that we need to have a mechanism if someone murders someone to remove them from the
What Mr. Goldsmith said when we revisited this issue, and then what I've loosely heard Mr. Graham say, is that due process would be in order, period. And that by virtue of the fact that we appointed them doesn't give us a magic wand to unappoint them.
No, what do you mean by due process, though? Criminal due process, or,
No,
Well, just the right, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Go ahead.
just the right, anybody who's going to be receiving some sort of punitive action against them that's been appointed, you're going to have to give them an opportunity to speak and
no, I
defend
get that.
themselves.
I get
That's
that,
the due
but what-
process.
What punitive, see, this is I think you walk a very narrow line when, if I tell a lie or say something to someone in the community that maybe I shouldn't have said, communicate to the public, township pictures, you can't remove, let me say I'm just on the planning commission. What is due process? I get to plead my case, which I'm going to defend myself. To who? It doesn't make sense to me. What right do we have? This has happened many times over the years, Tom, and you know that as well as I do. I can remember several, actually, that happened in the past, and I don't think the township board had a right to bring them before this board in front of the public and question them.
It's a serious move, no
It
doubt about it,
is.
and I don't remember this board ever doing anything like that.
Not this board, but
Well,
maybe 20 years ago.
maybe 20 years ago? Huh? All right.
It wouldn't take me long to help you remember, but
It's a serious move, and you can do it now. If you have an appointee that you feel is doing something wrong, then I guess you can try to remove them. The problem is there's not really a set of standards.
Right.
And you can try to do it, but sometimes it gets mixed up over whether they're not performing their duty or whether they've done something else. Like in the governor's statute, habitual drunkenness. Well, that's an old term. I don't know what that means in today's world, but that's in there. But by and large, it has to do with what you do when you're operating in your committee. Are you performing, your work? So,
Well, do you have oh, go ahead.
I think we ought to have something in place that everybody sees, because if we would like to remove someone from a committee because he didn't show up at any meetings, or he had a conflict of interest and voted anyway, there's no mechanism. And he could say, well, geez, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. If you have this policy there that lays those things out, this is what we expect of everyone, including us, and someone violates it and they're called to task for it, then they can't say, well, I didn't know about that. So I do think we need to press it forward and get it out there and let them read it.
Mr. Steiner?
And hopefully we'll never have to use it.
And when I said a board or committee, I agree. This particular board takes care of the appointees. We don't need an outside board to be appointed, but this board should be able to do that. Now, what Ms. Tivery just made a comment, and she said, referred to Mr. Graham because he's been around here probably longer than the rest of us. Not by age, by tenure.
Age 2, right?
But she said, look, Tom, look how many times over the years, how many of these things have happened. So does that mean we've turned a blind eye because things have happened and we never had a policy, we had no mechanisms, so that makes it okay? What are these things that have happened? Maybe things have happened that we should have known about, we didn't know about, because we didn't have a mechanism or process where somebody felt like they could make the complaint and come forward. And it also talks about that in here, about a person being able to make a complaint. So I think that, again, this was all brought forward because it was discussed a couple months ago. I did what I said, I brought you the information, and we need to do what this board feels, either ignore it and it goes away, or we discuss it, and I agree with move forward and get it back on the policy calendar, and we proceed. I mean, again, if we talked about this 2 years ago, nobody was saying 2 years ago we don't need an ethics policy. We must have thought we needed something because we tweaked it, we lined it. Can't say we didn't.
Is, Paul, you have a date in mind, or do you want to shoot out an email tomorrow for a date?
Whatever pleases the board is fine with me.
I don't want to try to get everybody to pick a date right now. If you want to look at your calendars, Paul, maybe shoot out a couple dates tomorrow. Is that good?
Sure.
Let's do that because we're coming into the time of year where people start taking vacations and that, so shoot out some dates.
Okay. Chief, you want to give your report?
Thank you, and my apologies for being a little bit late. I was tied up at a previous commitment, a little longer than expected. Just really briefly, just a couple things to update the board on. First and foremost, for our EMTs and our paramedics, it's EMS week, and it's just a time we recognize our paramedics, our EMTs, as well as the Monroe Community Ambulance EMTs and paramedics for the great job they do. So I thought it would be remiss not to mention that tonight. Just a couple items. The new ambulance passed inspections. It's in service. Been responding out at passing inspections yesterday, so it was placed in service immediately following that. So it's being utilized. Station 1, as far as an update on the design work, we've got a meeting a week from today with the designer to go over some conceptual ideas that he's got. And we hope to have something to bring for the board to review shortly after that, depending on how that meeting goes. So that's progressing well. The ladder truck, we've been given a 35 to 40-day target date, which means delivery should be somewhere around the 4th of July, maybe a little bit before the 4th of July. So that's right around the corner. And Mr. Francis, I forwarded the finance information to you, so.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sending the bill.
Lastly, the only other item is, I think we're pretty close, the supervisor and Mr. Nance and I have been working on the contract language, and I think we're pretty close to having it buttoned up, it seems like. So everything's kind of wrapping up, or will be wrapping up, I think, in the next month or 2 months, all the projects we've been working on. Other than that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks for all your hard work. We appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, new business, request for approval of vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $240,347.31. Fire District, $38,443.55. Police Fund, $2,288.12. Park Fund, $4,027.29. Transit System Fund, $34.25. Library Fund, $3,223.51. Downtown Development Authority, $1,629.16. Sewer O&M Fund, $1,413,217.31. Trust and Agency Fund, $1,419, for a grand total of $1,704,629.50.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
One thing. Oh, go ahead, Trudy.
You're going to talk about sewer? Okay, I'll talk about the rest. Large amount in the general fund, I was just going to go over There was a cemetery loan paid back at $50,000. Consumers was $30,000. Our park fund, that we go from the general to the park commission, is $67,000. And then the community cleanup was $11,000, so that's a little over half of that in the general fund.
To follow up on those comments, the reason that the sewer O&M fund is $1.4 million, or there are two large items in there. One is the second payment of $1 million toward the sewer upgrade. It's about a $24 million project, and we committed to paying $2 million down out of our funds toward it and borrow the rest from the state at a 2% interest rate, which is a great rate. So there's $1 million in there, plus there's $408,000 and some change for the bi-monthly operating expenses that we see. So that accounts for almost all of that at $1.4 million. A lot of money, but that's where it went.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, request for approval of the Monroe County Library System Branch Service Agreement. Jody, you want to come on up, or don't really need to? Okay, you have this in front of you.
Nancy,
like
you
a-
can come up too.
Yeah, Nancy, you can come up too. Oh, I didn't even see you sitting there, I'm sorry. What? You can see you looking at me, I can pull
You
it.
some new glasses, Paul.
Huh?
You some new glasses.
I might need glasses.
She's the person you really want to see, probably.
Oh, come on up, sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Nancy Belair. I'm the library director of the Monroe County Library System. I happen to live in Temperance as well, 1300 Winding Way. And you'll be happy to know I don't have a lengthy presentation or speech to give you. Just wanted to be on hand in case you have questions. This is an agreement that's been in place for literally decades. Many of you have seen it before. The only verbiage we changed is adding to the section that talks about long-distance phone bills being reimbursed if they're listed separately. Many of the townships and local units of government have been bundling their services, so they're unable to tell us what that long distance is. Also, the Universal Service Fund, E-rate kinds of things that we've been dealing with for years have gone away now. The feds have taken that away. So we just changed the verbiage to say if separate, we'll pay it if you bill us for it, but otherwise everything's the same.
Okay, very cool. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Graham?
I would just say, echo what's been stated here, and I've been involved with this for a long, long time. This has been one very successful partnership agreement that has worked for the benefit of the township. And of course, we were involved in tweaking this down through all the years, and I would just say this has been a success, and there'd be no reason not to. At least I hate to get into those types of things. I'm a lawyer, but it has been a success. It has worked. I did review this contract, and it is like the old ones. But again, we tweaked those over the years, and we have it in I think a situation where it's fair for both parties and good for both parties.
Okay.
That's all.
Well, I look for a motion then. Ms. Tinneberry?
I'd like to move that we approve the service agreement between Bedford Township and the Monroe County Library System for a period of the next 4 years from the date of execution.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none. Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you guys for all you do. We appreciate it.
Can I just ask a
Yep,
question here?
go ahead.
Not to pour salt in the wound, but at an earlier board meeting, we had a discussion about the Library Advisory Board and moving forward on the improvements that the taxpayer, or the voters actually approved in the millage. Have we been moving forward in that since the Supervisor's Department is kind of
Yeah,
that up.
I mean, we got something on the website last week, right? So,
On like the
for
trees
bids, the
and
trees. I didn't see anything for the painting just yet. Have we gotten the painting on there as well? I think it's just the trees right now.
I would have to double check what we have. I know they were working on.
Okay.
We're
both
moving
of them.
forward.
We're moving
I would like to
forward, though.
see a report on that, since it was a millage, and there's certain things that the the voters were, said would happen in the first year, the second year. I just want to make sure those things are on schedule. So if we could have like maybe an annual report on that to make sure that those things are moving forward.
I'm gonna
Sometimes
throw that in Craig's lap.
with somebody that is busy, like the supervisor, those things can get overlooked, so, yeah, that's good. Craig should take care of that.
Okay, moving on to 8C, request for approval of a land division for parcel number 5802-006-010-00, also known as 3861 West Route Road. Mister, come on up. Appreciate you being here, Alan.
Good evening. As required by the Land Division, anything over the 6-to-1 ratio, we are required to come to the board and present the request of the property owners for a land division. In this particular case, the parcel prior to the land division request and the prior standards that we had in place did meet the 4-to-1 ratio. They have gone to the BZA. A number of issues that were required to be addressed have been addressed. And with this in place, we move forward. The legals are, proposed legals are clear. The proposed surveys are clear. It takes us over the 6-to-1 ratio to, I believe it's 7.16. It still keeps the uniformity to the other parcels across that particular section of the township. And that's what we're here for tonight. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Ms. Dinnerberg?
I'm hoping you can answer this, Alan, if not, possibly the attorney, but it seems to me that they got the cart before the horse. Shouldn't they have had the land division approved before they got a BZA variance? Or, to me, it doesn't meet the BZA variance, and it doesn't meet our land division, so it says exceptional topographical or physical conditions, which there weren't any. And then it says a request for depth to width ratio greater than 6-to-1 may only be allowed in the sole discretion of the Township Board upon a finding of exceptional topographical or physical conditions with respect to the parcel or compatibility with surrounding lands or parcels. So, I mean,
We have to come to the board for that approval of the ratio before we can go forward and approve it. The topographical in this particular case, looking at the, there was a, give me a second here. Let me catch up the page I need to be on. Is marked in the back with the two asterisks. The big key here was the area here for the ag preservation, because of the condition of the property or the land with poor conditions of the growing of the soils and the wooded area that is there and the drainage issues that come into play, that is the hardship for the parcel.
that's not a hardship.
That would dramatically affect the ability to do the ag process, do the agging of it.
No,
The topographical stress on the properties.
they didn't have any intention to do the ag part of it. They haven't farmed it. I don't see that it's viable upon finding of exceptional topographical or physical conditions. And there's other ways of, you can drain the property. You can put in tile and drain the property if it's wet.
This is why we direct these to the BZA to seek those variances, those approvals. This is their process that we use for the property owners to move forward with their land division.
Well, I'm just going to say that I'm a firm believer in following the ordinance and also following the state land division act, and this doesn't meet either one of them, and I think that we do ourselves a disservice by approving things that are outside of what the law requires. And once you start it, then how many other people are going to want to divide their property so that they can build a house next door? That's a financial gain, and it's not a hardship, topographical or physical condition.
Mr. Steiner?
One of the things, when, as Alan just pointed out, about the property with the depth to width ratio, et cetera, and being agricultural, which would require the 5 acres, 330, the property has not and never has really been utilized for ag, and even if they wanted to, they couldn't use it for ag, and the topographical issue is the wooded area and the drainage and the wet soil and the water that lays on that property. So if they were in a residential zoning, they wouldn't have to deal with the same things we're doing with the agricultural property. So as pointed out again by Mr. Goldsmith, it's not used for agricultural production in part due to the wooded area and or drainage. He continued to say, if to preserve this area for agricultural preservation, the goal or objection is not going to be achieved. He stated that a practical difficulty of this particular parcel could be if the property is unable to meet the intent of the master plan, should the board be so inclined to grant the variance. We did talk about the drainage, and that's actually part of the motion as well, that talks about for being able to drain the current property, and when they do build this other home on the property, that they will have to work with a swale and a drain to be able to help alleviate some of that issue. So those things were covered in the BZA meeting.
I have to agree with Mr. Steiner. I feel like the same thing. It's not being farmed, and there is issues, so I don't have a problem with it as it is. Ms. Stenberry?
Yeah, I read that. I read it all, but it's not, it's still, you just said it yourself. They weren't using it for farmland, so that's going to be the hardship, that they can't use it for farmland. Every bit of farmland in this area was cleared of a wooded property back in the day when they first started making farmland. So if you want to make it a farm, you clear the property and you put in tile. I drive past miles and miles and miles of farmland 4 times a week, and they had to clear the trees to get the farmland, and they put in tile for drainage. There's options there if you wanted to do it. Now you can come to the BZA and say that, well, you can't farm it. You never did farm it. Please, if we're not going to uphold our ordinances, then we might as well just let anybody pay their fees and get what they ask for. That's how I feel.
Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Graham?
Sticking my nose in where I probably shouldn't, but I'll just make a few comments. It doesn't tell you what to do or what not to do. But to answer Nancy's first point about coming, I thought she was indicating about coming here or coming to the BZA, which would be first. I suppose that it could have been, either one could have been first, okay? But the one reason I would, and I wasn't part of this, but the one reason I would think to come here after the BZA was because if the BZA doesn't approve the variance, this doesn't come here. There's no, you can't, you're back to the 4-to-1 or whatever the depth to width ratio was, and so wouldn't be anything for this board to do. But I suppose it could go either way. And yes, I I'll tell you, I am pleased to hear someone say that the rules, we should take a close look at these rules. I mean, the state says 4-1, and we have 4-1 to 6-1 being done administratively, and anything over 6-1 has to be done by this township board. So I'm happy to hear that. In this particular case, you know, I read what my partner, you know, had said and what the board, the BZA had determined and what have you. And I would say, you know, at this point, with the BZA already acting, you know, it makes it hard to turn this thing down. But you have the right to, because it's because what we're dealing with here has nothing to do with zoning or BZA or frontage or anything. It only has to do with that 6-to-1 depth to width ratio. And if anybody wonders why there is such a thing and why the state cares about it, is because we're trying not to have the long ribbons. We're trying to have, you know, more lot things. But I can just say this from experience. Again, I hate to keep going back to the old days, but in this township, we tried the 4-to-1 depth to width ratio. There's always going to be an exception where you have to, it doesn't work. You know, there's always going to be. I mean, I can remember over by Nalepus Pond, I mean, there were all these ribbons. They were already there. And, you know, to deal with them. And then people died and, you know, family members would come in. So there's always a time when it is appropriate to grant the to grant the depth to width ratio. So it's a reality that we deal with, and you know, I would just say, whatever you vote on, it's your right. It comes here for you to make that decision.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Seeing none, I look for a motion. Mr. Steiner?
Mr. Peroni, I make the motion to approve the land division request on parcel 5802-02-006-010-00 at 3861 Rauch Road. And instead of reading the whole thing, I will say part of the motion must include the language from the minutes of the March 4th meeting from Mr. Goldsmith. There are 3 asterisk points on the meeting minutes, and also adding the full motion that was made and passed during the BZA meeting on March 4th.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
No, and I'd like the minutes to reflect that there was, in my opinion, no exceptional topographical or physical conditions stated.
Hirschberger votes yea. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-1. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, moving forward to comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes. Come on up. Mr.
Evening,
Tisdale,
Logan
if you
Tisdale,
want to explain
1408
why the
Brandywine
flags,
Street.
if you want to explain why the flag's here, you're more than welcome to as well.
I brought that flag in today because May 7th or May 27th is Memorial Day, and so I want to remember the people that have lost their lives serving our country. People don't know much about Memorial Day. They get it kind of confused with Veterans Day. Veterans Day honors men and women who have served in the military, whereas Memorial Day, which used to be called Decoration Day, celebrates the men and women who've given their lives in our U.S. military. We have people buried here right in our local cemeteries who were killed during the Iraq War, 2003, right in Whiteford. Here we have a young man that was killed 20 years old and stuff. We also have a gentleman that I knew is buried up in our cemetery on Lewis Avenue who was a prisoner of war during World War II. And I'm not going to mention their names because I've never approved it through the families, but we sometimes forget how important Memorial Day is. I didn't remember, I didn't really know how important it was to me until I started serving in the military. I spent 2.5 years in Germany. We think that freedom is free. It's not. If you want to know about what freedom is, you go to places like Belgium and stuff or in Holland where they have cemeteries with American dead there. And I was doing some looking online, and there's one cemetery where there's 8,301 Americans buried. And they have all these beautiful white marble crosses there. And people in the local town adopt the grave. They actually adopt it. And there's a waiting list. And they go out there and they spend time bringing flowers out there and spending time at that grave site thinking about that soldier that gave his life for their freedom. And it's amazing to me. I looked at one family. They actually looked up the name of the person, found out what unit he was in, where he died, how he died, actually contacted some of his family members here in the United States. And this young gentleman in mid-20s, you would hardly think that he would even care, but his grandmother told him about what it was like during the Nazi occupation when the Americans came in and landed and liberated Holland. And I got to thinking that we don't care that much. I spent 2.5 years in Berlin. I saw what the difference was between freedom and not freedom. When I saw people standing at the wall there looking over, seeing their families over in East Germany and stuff who were not free, and then seeing how free that they were. I marched in about 6 parades while I was there with the Berlin Brigade. We marched with the British, the French, and the Americans on the west side of Berlin. And when the Americans marched by, they applauded. And it gets you choked up when you think that you're serving in a foreign country and you represent the United States. And even though I didn't give my life and stuff, I still spent 28 months of my life over there in service to this country. And I think to myself, we just don't grasp the enormity of the sacrifices of our military. And not just the people that serve, but also their families. My dad and 3 brothers served in World War II. My stepfather served in World War II. And every one of us on this panel probably knows somebody that served in the military during the war. Some maybe have not even come back. I hope that Monday doesn't just become a 3-day holiday to go out and spend money somewhere or just have a picnic somewhere, but that we actually take time to remember that our freedom came at a great cost. And as a former soldier, I know that there's a sacrifice that's involved. And we need to appreciate that. And I just hope that we just don't take it for granted. And when I look at that flag and stuff, I think that someone must have given their life for that flag. And I have my dad's flag at home and stuff, and even though he did not die in the war, he served 20 years. So I think that we should appreciate Memorial Day more. Maybe some of our kids ought to do what they do over in Holland and stuff. They take these kids from the high schools and the grammar schools and the kindergartens, take them out there and they show them these graves and say, because you are free today is because of these men and women who gave their lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Logan. I appreciate it. Any more comments from the public?
Got to get this back down here. I'm Jody Russ. I live at 1273 Winding Way. Craig would probably address this, but I just thought that I would say, based on Nancy's question when we were up earlier, Harry Lambers, who's on the Library Advisory Board, is doing a wonderful job at coming up with detailed specs for these projects that we have going. So he is working with Sherwin-Williams right now to do the specs for the paint, and you guys should have that pretty soon. And we're also working on the landscaping at this point too. So somebody came in to look at furniture for replacement of some pieces that are broken or damaged. So he's been a great asset, and we didn't even know that because he sat there quietly for quite some time. But now he's working really hard at getting those things into Trudy. So I just wanted you guys to be aware. Thanks.
Very cool. Thank you. Any more comments from the public? Andrew, you're sitting quiet over there. Any comments from you?
She does.
Come on up.
My My name is Brittany Isaacs. My maiden name is Stevens. I grew up in Bedford my whole life. I graduated here in 2004. I'm married with, me and my husband had 3 kids, and then we adopted my niece and nephew. We went through the foster care process and we adopted them. And now I've been battling severe health issues for the last 3 years. I just went to a tick specialist, and she believes that it is from the tick. I was bit 3 years ago at like Whiteford and Stearns area in Bedford at my son's baseball game. So that's a little bit of my story. 3 weeks ago, well, like 3 months ago is when it got more severe. It started with like neuropathy, fatigue all the time, bowel problems. I started peeing in my pants, issues like that. And all the doctors just kept pushing me off and giving me pills. And I didn't want that life for me. Like, I wasn't functioning as a mom. So after that, 3 months ago, I had a seizure while I was driving in the car. Thank God my mom was with me and my kids. We were all safe. And then last month, I was in the hospital for 4 days. I had to get a pacemaker put in because it's affecting my heart now. Mainly why I'm here is I want to spread awareness to the community because it's severely impacted my life and my whole family's life. According to the CDC, approximately 300,000 people may get Lyme disease each year. Lyme disease can be serious or fatal if not properly diagnosed and treated. Ticks are usually 1/3 to 1/4 inch in size. We have over 20 different species in Michigan. April through September is the biggest season for the threat of it. So I wanted to talk about prevention and like what we can do to prevent getting bit since there's no vaccine right now for it. Symptoms, like right after the bite, can include or can emerge weeks, months, and even years after your initial infection. If a patient has not received treatment or if antibiotic treatment was not fully effective. So even if you were treated with antibiotics, you can still have lifelong issues with it. Later on, symptoms, I'm sorry, I keep saying so much. Symptoms include a rash, but not always. I was bit on my scalp. I didn't notice it until the next morning, and I wash my hair every day, so I know it wasn't on me for 24 hours. I know that. I was going like this in the shower, and I felt it in my head, and I pulled it out. I didn't know what to do with it. What are you supposed to do with a tick? I don't know. My mom's like, oh, nothing. What do you do with a tick? Throw it down the toilet. Okay. Well, now I know, after further review, you could actually keep it and send it out somewhere, and they can test it to see what diseases it has. Later on, symptoms can include rash, but not always, fever, headaches, body aches, a stiff neck, fatigue, flu-like symptoms. Symptoms without treatment or can include a severe headache or neck stiffness, rashes on other areas of the body, arthritis with joint pain and swelling, especially in the knees, loss of muscle tone or drooping on one or both sides of the face, heart palpitation or irregular heartbeat, inflammation of brain and spinal cord, shooting pains, numbness or tingling in the hands or feet. And I have some pictures of like the most common ones that are found in our area, but you can see like how small they are. There's bigger ones, and then there's one right here by my nail, but you can't even see it. Like, that's the size of these. And most of the time, you don't know that you were bit. You don't always get a rash. I never had a rash. People looked at my head after I got bit. I didn't notice any of it. I was Lyme illiterate. I didn't know about this. The test that they're doing in the doctor's office is severely inaccurate, according to the Lyme specialists. It's only 50-something% accurate. So what's going on, I believe, and what she believes, people are getting diagnosed with all of these illnesses like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, stuff like that, and it is linked to this. Like, they actually have either Lyme disease or a co-infection. There's somebody on my Michigan Lyme website that she tested positive for 28 different infections from one tick. This is how bad it is. We need to like start something in the community, whether to like bring it up every month on like how to check, or just a reminder like, hey, these are what they look like. Make sure you're checking. Things you can do is wear like light clothing outside. Make sure you're checking. They like to go like behind the ears and in the scalp, and apparently they like curly hair because they love me. And my last statement is, and a little bit more actually. The doctors around here, and what I found out is my treatment, I am going to need IV antibiotic treatments for at least 40 days, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and insurance does not cover it. And there's a show on Amazon that's geared towards Lyme disease, but it kind of gives you the gist of what's going on. I'm not sure about it. I've never looked into this. All I know is that I'm sick and I have not been helped, and I've been to numerous different doctors in our area. Everyone's been pushing me aside. I may not be able to get help or to get myself completely cured, but I hope that I can bring awareness to the community and help, because I know that there's probably many of you that may be affected with this, or it affects one of your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And if you want to leave us with some of the information, we could put it on our website
Yeah.
and social media pages. But we appreciate you coming and sharing the awareness for the public. Thank you very much. Okay, any more comments from the public? Okay, comments from board members?
She had
Oh,
something.
you got a comment? Come on up. Yeah. Yep.
Hi, my name is Diane, and I just want to touch on your comment, or your,
Hey, Diane, could you give us your address?
okay. I just wanted to touch on yours as far as the ticks or the limes. Last 2 weeks ago, I went to a mushroom hunt in Hillsdale County, and one of the things that they have posted everywhere in yards is Lyme's disease is real. Big signs everywhere. So we checked every portion of all of our bodies for that reason. But I just wanted to share that with everybody because I believe the signs helped us to realize how real it is. So hopefully.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, moving on to board comments. Mr. Clemens?
Two things, Mr. Supervisor. The first is it is EMS appreciation, and I wanted to make sure that I said thank you to every dispatcher, firefighter, and paramedic in our community. We've recently added ALS services to this community, and the amount of assistance and help, and quite honestly, saved lives just in the short few months is amazing. And while technology is fantastic, if you don't have good people to administer the technology, it's somewhat academic. So I wanted to make sure I said thank you there. And I also wanted to echo Logan's comment on Memorial Day. It is our generation's responsibility to make sure that the next generation understands that while it can be a fun weekend, and there's certainly nothing wrong with grilling out, responsibility also entails that we think about our freedoms and we think about the price that's paid for those freedoms, and that we don't just look past it as kind of an asterisk on the day. It's a very real day, and having been blessed to travel the world, I also agree with Logan that so many people don't understand how great our country is. We fight and we feud, and it's amazing how we get bent out of shape over this or that, and then you go to a country where people aren't free to take their children out of a school, or people aren't free to leave the country without their government's permission. That still happens in the year 2019. That's not pre-World War II. And so I think it's just a good day for reflection, and thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for bringing the flag tonight. Logan, it's very respectful. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Montron?
Same exact thing, just echoing both of those guys of utilizing Memorial Day, whether it, like you said, even if you're still doing whatever at the lake or who knows what, that it's we're remembering freedom isn't free. That's all I have.
Okay. Ms. Tenenberry?
Yes, I wanted to read this definition of ethics. Moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. I believe that's something that applies to me. It's not something I can apply to other people. I have no control over someone else's ethics, and I don't want to be in a position of controlling someone else's ethics. If we come up with a policy whereby someone has to sign on their own and they govern themselves, I'm all for that, but I don't want to be a part of having to decide for someone else what their ethics are, because I believe I'm a person that holds myself accountable for many things that other people think are fine, and I think that's fine. If that's how they want to live their life, I'm not there to judge their ethics. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think that we all need to be reminded very frequently about our ordinances. If we're not going to uphold our ordinances, then I think we need to change our ordinances. But we can't continue to approve of an ordinance and not stand behind it. I was convicted this last Wednesday because I voted in favor on the Planning Commission of violating our sign ordinance. And at the time, during the discussion, I thought that was the best thing to do. But in retrospect and in talking to other people in the planning department after that, and our wonderful other attorney, Marty Campreth, who comes to the Planning Commission to help us along those lines, I realized how wrong that was, and I'm confessing it here tonight so that I will continue to remind myself that I need to uphold the ordinances. There is Board of Zoning Appeals that does allow for appealing an ordinance, but that should be in a very rare instance. People in the community want what they want for their own purposes, but we, as a board, have to remember that we have put these ordinances in place for the purposes of all people, and to give one person or, you know, one person here, one person there, a variance, it needs to be according to the law, which says that it has to be a hardship of the land. Otherwise, we should stand behind our ordinances. And the last thing is, over the years, I guess, I've had people ask me why sometimes I'm the only one to talk about something that's on the agenda. And tonight I found myself a little having that run in my ears, because we all voted for each thing on here. But I feel like I was maybe let down by members of the board that I never heard discuss or comment or let me know as a board member what they were feeling about some of these things that were on the agenda. I don't feel like I can make a fair, honest decision just based on my own thoughts or ideas. I need, and that's exactly what happened last Wednesday at the Planning Commission meeting. There was discussion by only a couple people, and then afterwards I realized I didn't hear the input that I should have heard regarding the decision that was made on that sign ordinance. So I would hope that everyone would participate in the discussion, that we and the public would be able to hear each and every person's thoughts and comments on each subject, because if you're going to vote on something, you must have an opinion. If you have a vote, you must have an opinion, yea or nay. So that's my motherly, grandmotherly word for the night. Thank you.
Mr. Steiner?
Just real quick on reiterating about Memorial Day, Mr. Tisdale is very correct that many people forget what it's really about. And in today's society, part of the reason that people forget is they're too busy texting about anything and everything other than what this country has gone through over the years. So maybe a good thing this weekend when people are just texting and looking up all kinds of other things, maybe just say, you know what, why don't you look up what took place over in Belgium, over in Holland, and give them a little bit of perspective and time frame, and just, and I know a lot of kids are going to go, oh, I'm not going to do that, but you will get some. And even if you get some, that some of those kids are going to reflect on that, and they're going to say, gosh, I didn't know that, and they just might tell a friend about it, and some of those friends might take a little interest too. And my fear for this country is, as we continue the way we are today, there are so many things that are going to be forgotten. You know, just like when 9/11 took place, shortly after it was never forget, never forget. And my gosh, you used to see flags flying like crazy every year, and now the flags start to dwindle off. You don't see the flags that often, and you know, unless it's a major milestone, they don't really say much about 9/11. It's just another day that's come and gone, but there's another day that we must never forget. So we should all remember how we have this freedom that we have in this country. It was men and women that fought for this country, and many, many gave their lives. I do want to comment too on the ticks and Lyme disease issue. I'm very glad that something like that was brought forward tonight. You basically just create a public service. Many of us have heard about, you know, ticks and Lyme disease, and most people don't think, oh, it's no big deal. I don't have a bunch of tall weeds around my house. It doesn't matter. You can get them in various places. Probably about 8 months ago, my son had his daughter, which was 6 at the time, and found a little spot on her head, and like you said, they go for in the scalp area, and sure enough, it was a tick, and luckily we got it, and everything's been okay. But you know, you make comments like that if they did have diseases and they did bite, it might show up down the road many years later. So that's another thing, be very cognizant. And you know what? It's not just ticks that are out there. There are other things that are out there that you could get bit by. So be very careful, and when kids are out playing this summer, scour those kids with your eyes, not just soap and water. Scour them with your eyes. So that's all I have for this evening.
Mr. Francis?
Just sitting here listening to the responses that were made to Logan Tisdale's comment on Memorial Day, it seems to me that the younger folks in this country, and we're all guilty of helping this, they really aren't taught history. if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it, someone said. In today's society, Rick mentioned it just a minute ago, that if they're not taught the meaning of Memorial Day, or the meaning of Veterans Day, or the meaning of Christmas, or the meaning of any of the holidays that we as a country have celebrated for all of our lives, they'll slip away. If they're not constantly brought up, we need to bring it up to our own kids at home. Don't rely on just the school. It's all of our responsibility, because if that freedom slips away, we'll all suffer. And I'm concerned about that. I can see it maybe happening here, and we wouldn't want that. It really doesn't have anything to do with township business, but it seems to be the topic of the night, and I just am worried that we will let those historical truths slip away if we don't keep remembering them.
Ms. Hirschberger?
A few things. I want to remind everyone out there that we are still looking for library board members, and the communication committee is also looking for a member. If you're looking to do something for your community and one of those boards sounds of interest, please come into the township and fill out an application. We have mosquito dunks at the township. If you're a Bedford resident, just bring your ID and you can pick up some mosquito dunks. They're good for standing water only, and they are safe. It will not kill animals. You can put them in fish ponds even, it won't hurt your fish. We are closed on Monday, May 27th for Memorial Day, and I want to remind everybody that the American Legion and the VFW hold a Memorial Day service. It's at the Lambertville Cemetery. Starts at 10 o'clock, and I've been going to that almost every year. My husband plays taps, so we've been doing it for over 30 years. And that's all I have.
And that is a really good service to do. I've gone a few times with my kids as well. Thank you for all the comments tonight, Logan, and your story. I appreciate you taking the time to come here to educate the community, and we'll make sure we do whatever we can do, because it is serious. My kids get them out every year. The process has started with Manick and Smith at the Michigan Tavern, so I was out there today with them, went through the buildings a little bit. So look to have some information back from them in the next week or so. Going to move it as quickly as possible to get that done. I just want to thank the library for everything you guys do. I mean, my family uses the library every day, and they're at the library. I mean, they spend a lot of their days there. So I appreciate all the programs you guys put on. It really, it does a lot for our community. So thank you for that. I had something else I was going to say. I forgot it. I wanted to mention too, with the added staff with ordinances, ordinance officers, we've put out almost 94 illegal burns. And after talking to the fire chief, with them going on a call, it ranges anywhere from $100 to $300 a call. So we've saved the township and taxpayers a lot of money by, sending an ordinance guy, taking that call rather than sending a $250,000 apparatus and 3 firemen to a burning call. So it is working. We're putting out a lot of illegal burns, and people are actually, getting better about it too. So they're with the booklets that they've made out, and we've handed out a lot of those booklets and the information and the awareness we've put on Facebook. People are coming around to it and, understanding the times that you can burn and what you can do with it so you don't have to burn. We have Mulch King that we contract with that you can bring your leaves and grass and debris all year long for free. So keep that in mind when you have grass and leaves and all these clippings that you can bring them there. So other than that, I have nothing else. Any more comments? We stand adjourned.